San Francisco, 1969. Chinatown. It seemed like any normal Tuesday morning, but before noon arrived, something would unfold on Grant Avenue that nobody present would ever erase from memory. Chinatown was never part of the city in the same way as other neighborhoods. It belonged to the people who lived within it. Its boundaries weren't marked by streets or maps. They existed in customs, routines, and unspoken understanding. Each morning moved with the same steady pattern. Vendors carefully lined up their fruit. Restaurant doors swung open, letting out steam, and the scent of meals started hours before dawn. Elderly men settled into their familiar spots, not merely to sit, but to reassure themselves of something greater, that this place was still theirs. Because in Chinatown, survival wasn't some story from the past. It was part of daily life. And on this particular morning, everything appeared unchanged. Peaceful. Ordered. Familiar. Yet underneath that calm, tension always remained. The kind that never fully disappears. The kind people learn to carry without ever letting it show. Because those who lived there understood what the rest of the city often failed to see: you don't wait for trouble, you assume it will come. Bruce Lee moved through those streets the same way he moved through life. Alert. Focused. Completely present. No wasted motion, no wandering attention. Every step had purpose, every glance was intentional. He wasn't trying to get somewhere specific. He didn't have to. Movement itself was enough reason. For 40 minutes, nothing seemed out of place. Only the steady pulse of Chinatown, the quiet strength, the discipline of a community tested too many times to ever let its guard down completely. Then Bruce turned a corner and noticed something that did not belong to that morning. An elderly man, a police officer, and a scene this neighborhood had witnessed far too many times before. The officer, Davis, stood over Mr. Chen, a 73-year-old shopkeeper who had spent 31 years building a life on those streets. And within moments, that dignity was being challenged. A boot nudged a box. Not violently, but far from kindly. Then came the voice, cold, patronizing, and all too familiar. Mr. Chen didn't respond. He didn't argue. He didn't even raise his eyes. Because he already knew how stories like this ended. The same way they always did, with nothing. Bruce Lee watched. And in that instant, he stayed still, because sometimes the most difficult action is doing nothing at all. But what he witnessed did not fade when he continued on. It remained with him. And 4 minutes later, that same moment returned to meet him again. At the corner of Grant and California, Officer Davis spotted Bruce Lee. Something about him immediately irritated the officer. It wasn't what Bruce was doing. It was the way he carried himself. Calm, loose, unshaken. Like he belonged exactly where he stood. And to a man like Davis, that kind of confidence felt unacceptable. To him, it was a problem. So Davis crossed the street. Same stride, same arrogance, same routine he had carried out countless times before. Only this time, he had chosen the wrong man. Let me see some identification. Bruce didn't argue. He didn't resist. He handed it over calmly, because he understood something most people never do: not every fight is won with fists. Davis studied the ID, not looking for facts, but for a reason. Then came the words. The same words heard on those streets for generations. Words loaded with history, humiliation, and authority. But this time, Bruce Lee did not absorb them the way others had been forced to. His face changed. Not with anger, not yet. Something colder. Controlled. Calculated. And Davis misread it entirely. He mistook it for compliance. He mistook it for fear. He believed the encounter was already finished. So he did what he always did. He pushed further. His hand moved quickly, almost casually, and struck Bruce Lee across the face. Not hard enough to wound, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The crack carried across the street. 2 children froze in a nearby doorway. Faces began appearing silently in the windows above, because everyone knew what usually followed that sound. Nothing. Nothing ever happened after it. Except this time, something had changed. Bruce Lee did not respond like the others. He didn't step backward. He didn't lower his eyes. He didn't fade away. He became motionless. Not the stillness of fear. The stillness of choice. And for the first time that morning, the encounter stopped being routine and started becoming dangerous. There is always a moment before an explosion when the world turns silent. This was that moment. Bruce Lee stood perfectly still. But inside him, the decision had already been made. Davis stepped forward, certain of himself, ready to finish what he had started. He believed he was in command. He wasn't. Bruce Lee had already assessed everything, every angle, every movement, every possible ending. Then Bruce's hand moved. Fast. Direct. Exact. Not driven by emotion, but by purpose. Davis reacted on instinct. His hand dropped to his weapon, and in less than a second, a gun was aimed at Bruce Lee's chest. Everything stopped. The street. The air. The faces watching from the windows above. This was no longer routine. It had become something else, something permanent. Bruce Lee froze in mid-motion. Not because he was unable to continue, but because he noticed what no one else had. The children were still standing in the doorway. Still watching. Still unable to move. And in that instant, the fight was over before it ever began. Bruce slowly placed his hands behind his back. It was a choice. A deliberate surrender, not to Davis, but to the moment itself. Because sometimes the greatest strength is choosing not to let everything collapse. Davis misunderstood it, just as he had misunderstood everything else. He thought he had won. So he reached for his radio and made the call. What he didn't realize was that the moment hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. And 6 minutes later, everything shifted. Another officer arrived. Officer Williams. He stepped into the scene expecting something ordinary. What he found was anything but ordinary. Davis with a gun drawn. A man standing with his hands behind his back, completely calm. Too calm. Williams hesitated. Something about that stillness felt wrong. It wasn't fear. It wasn't obedience. It was control. Then recognition began to form, slowly at first, piece by piece, until it struck him all at once. He moved closer, stared again, and quietly asked, "Do you know who this is?" Davis frowned, annoyed and confused. Williams leaned in and spoke the name softly. Bruce Lee. And in that instant, everything changed. Davis's confidence fractured, then fell apart completely. Because now he understood. This was not just another man. This was not just another routine stop. This was a mistake that would not simply vanish. A moment that could not be hidden. A decision that would follow him long after this street was empty. Slowly, he lowered the gun and returned it to its holster. For the first time that morning, he moved with caution, with awareness. He said something. Perhaps an apology. But it was not enough. It could never be enough. Some actions do not disappear because words are spoken afterward. Bruce Lee understood that. He did not argue. He did not respond. He accepted only what the moment could give, and what it never could. Then he moved. Bruce Lee turned and walked away. No anger. No speech. Only motion. The same motion that had brought him there in the first place. But everyone watching knew this was no longer the same walk. Behind him, Chinatown slowly returned to itself. Vendors resumed their work. Doors opened again. Voices came back to the streets. Because that is what Chinatown does. It endures. It continues. Not because nothing happened, but because everything did. The children in the doorway remained still. They watched him fade down the street. And without knowing it, they would carry that memory for the rest of their lives. The old man on the bench watched as well, quiet, steady, unmoved. He had seen something like this before. Not the exact scene, but the burden of it, the meaning beneath it. Bruce Lee passed by him. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that single glance, everything was understood. No words were necessary, because some truths are too heavy to be spoken. As Bruce Lee disappeared into the morning light, the street appeared unchanged. But it was not. Something had shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. But permanently. And Chinatown carried that shift forward the same way it carries all things, silently, fully, without ever setting it down. Because the true story of that morning was never about the slap, the gun, or even the name. It was about control. Restraint. And the strength of a man who chose not to destroy a moment, even when he had the power to do so. That choice is what made it unforgettable.